Okay. Uh. Hmm. Uh. Okay, pulling it up. Why is it? Yep. Share copy. Okay, I'll post this to. I'm very sorry if anybody's in the chat right now. Sorry for the lateness. Okay. Just getting the word out, chat. If anyone's in there. Uh, let's see. For the full delay. Okay. So let's see. Anyone here? Oh, okay. uh, oh, hey, James. You see, the Anglo art is making things that are imperfect look perfect. So let's see. Where did I put? There. Oh shoot! It appears I have misplaced my notes. Okay, chat. Well, I will essentially free riff off of my notes while I search for them because I just had them in written form. Now they appear to have gone. No, I had notes. They were of the analog variety because I'm old-fashioned like that. Anyway, I'm not going to abandon the chat right now, and the whole purpose of this entire exercise was to essentially outline a rough draft of an essay that's been kind of stewing my head for a while, dealing with a lot of different issues. Yeah, ultimately, no, I'll post the notes in the Telegram chat later, whichever chat you're in, David. The anyway, so basically the purpose of this essay And the whole title kind of betrays it in that it is essentially a sequel of sorts of a, a sequel of sorts to the famous essay "The Abolition of Man" by C.S. Lewis, but it's taking a very different tact in what it is focusing upon. Because whereas whereas in the case of the abolition of man, he's primarily focused on he uses aesthetics as a launching point to talk about morality, um, in order to talk about things like the natural law and the Tao and such. And and in my case, what I'm going for here is looking at how we as a society have let our moral our moral judgments to affect things at the aesthetic level, and those ending up reflecting back upon themselves. Um, let's see, where I know I had it here. I wrote the notes like 2 days ago. I was trying to, well, 2 days ago, I was going to do the stream then, but Google had its BS. Where? This is actually getting kind of annoying. Anyway, sorry, scatterbrained. Anyway, the in essence, what we are struggling with at the societal level right now that I'd like to focus upon is how we use uh gosh darn it, where the notes are really beginning to bother me. I just had them. Chat, wait one moment, I may disconnect. I know I brought them with me. Where are they? Oh, there they are. There. I mindlessly placed them down uh on a ledge. So here it is. Okay. Here's my outline. So yes. And so in particular, one of the things that I believe makes is the battleground of our anthropology, because ultimately our culture war is based on anthropology, um, is how we view the use of the imagination of man. In particular, Lewis has talked about this extensively in other places, and he opens with this concept of the moral imagination. And the moral imagination is essentially, as he opens up with it, would be, for example, the moral category of sublime. It's not just a purely moral; it's a moral aesthetic. It's an aesthetic judgment that has moral connotations and loadings to it. And so, and so, one of the things that I see is kind of like I respectfully criticize my colleagues in this movement, this thing of ours, is that oftentimes when you look at technology, they take a very reductionist approach to technology, not realizing that the tradition that they so hail relies off of moral values and judgments and the architecture, the things, the categories that make up a person's moral imagination to protect them and keep them from being reduced to mere materialist categories and conceptions. So, like for example, people would be pretty rightly and instinctually mock your typical redditor, for example, that that would that would describe football and see a football game, and he would just say, "Oh, it's random people that you don't know. Why do you have any pride about it?" And then they would just miss all the human elements, all the human expressed poetry that is the moral imagination and the tribalism and the local pride because ultimately the atheist materialist is blind to those things. And so here comes, here I come now with that kind of setup. IR Luddite. Um, that sounds actually like a pretty good IPA. I probably would actually buy that IR Luddite. Uh, but this comes now where I think that we need to wrestle with and in many respects subvert what Baudrillard and his acolytes and both within and without the dissident right, for lack of a better term, have done with the conception of the hyperreal. Because quite frankly, I struggle with the categories they try to force upon for they try to force upon uh hyper reality, because man is ultimately a creature of imagination. The is a lot beer. Um, Man is ultimately a creature of imagination and narrative. One of the things that the postmodernists got right in a very real sense was understanding and recognizing the fact that we are storytelling creatures, and that ultimately we bury everything in narrative. And I would argue that us in the dissident right have unwittingly adopted in a wholesome manner some aspects of hyperreality that is good and healthy and normal. We just don't recognize it as moving into hyperreality and summering there. And that prime example would be the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is an example of a certain level of hyperreality, not the fullest level, where um, oftentimes oftentimes things becomes hopelessly distorted. In that case, it's what would be called like a first order simulacra. Tolkien was very literate at very literate. The thing itself was actually a pretty good but fake copy of Norse mythology and Northern European mythology. Yet, what has it become? It's suffered the same fate that, in many respects, that Harry Potter has on the left. And the difference, of course, being that we're drawing from something much more substantial as literature than than any type of the or sorry than Harry Potter. In this case, however, what we typically call mythologization um, is already begun to occur, and it results in this very weird thing. I'm sorry. Back from the top. Just just lost my nerves. Um, in the case of the Lord of the Rings, something that was very interesting that I read from Christopher Tolkien, son of J.R.R. Tolkien, was that to him the lore of the Lord of the Rings in Middle Earth was more real in a sense than Babylon. And I think that's touching upon something where you have a reversal of what we typically deem mythologization of history, where King Arthur, in a certain sense, occupies these two different spheres that we call truth and fiction. On the one hand, you have the historical King Arthur that may or may not have existed and is an open debate of a open question to historians. And then you have you also have the actual actual King Arthur as is represented in the hearts of England, the King Arthur that every red-blooded Englishman hopes will come back to save England at her dearest hour. The and you see a similar sort of reversal with in the case of Tolkien. Like Tolkien has now become, because he produced an actually comprehensive world to live in with a comprehensive history. It's not just something that's cheap YA fiction that happened to have very good characterization in the case of Harry Potter. This is actually like a lived world. Now, arguably, the Tolkien that we all perceive, where we all kind of think of the Peter Jackson movies, but then if we're the OGs, we'll also say, but Tom Bombadil and whatnot. We're not actually engaging it as the thing itself, but rather we're enjoying it in a social context by which by which we actually perceive and build it and use it to interact and interpret the world around us. And and consequently, we see it outside of like just sheer narrative. We also see this in terms of like actual like facts that start to break down that perception between how human imagination versus shows that it can house truths about the world, some truths that are disconnected from material reality in a very real sense. Like you saw that with the ancients and the philosophers with things like the Chilagon, the where it's like this million-sided agon, or a 10,000-sided agon, I think it is, that it looks like a circle to the human eye, but at the same time we can conceptually hold that it has this very important quantitative difference about it. And then you get it today in terms of where actual ideas begin to have such a radical power that it begins to affect material reality. Like the Bitcoin paper would be the easy one, where the mere idea of Bitcoin has now caused, as a mimetic virus almost, something like 2% of the world's electricity to be consumed by crypto miners. Like that, like in a very real sense, as much as Baudrillard would hate to say it, like hyper real things, the idea, the world of ideas that are ultimately derived from pure abstractions, not really connected to reality. Like cryptology is, it's just number theory. It's not at all connected to our everyday lived intuitive experience of things. Um, hyper reality is in fact more real than real in a way that Baudrillard would be kind of horrified by. And and so this now moves on to the section on practical application and how we perceive ourselves in in the uh, in the dissonant right, and how do we move forward at a more practical level. The the problem and the benefit, or not, sorry, our strength and our weakness as whole creatures of hyper reality comes down to the fact that ultimately we use masks that end up using us. The masks that we take upon allow us to amplify certain aspects of our personalities and subtract from them as well. One of the most obvious ones being that you can take out much more aggression upon your fellow man, and you never have to get punched in the face for it. And at the same time, it can all that while in one person that hyper aggressive quality may be bad, in a more reserved person, it may rebalance them to let their personality fully properly express. And and likewise, it allows you to. Uh, I am sorry, I'm getting called on Discord by someone. I think. Wait, where am I getting called on? Oh, uh, why is Doug Dimmadome calling me? Gonna, sorry, Doug. Why did you call me? Is this just a prank? Anyway, back to the story, or not the story, but the essay. We're almost through the essay, um, or the outline of the essay. Um, you reach to the realm of masks, and it's interesting. Not a lot of philosophers, because I took a very good course in college. It was a course on friendship, and the philosophy of friendship and what the great men of history have said on friendship. And one of the things that I think is profoundly missing for now is a great mind to discourse upon the nature of friendship as mediated through the internet and the masks that it naturally produces. Even for people that are, face fagging, you still can't remove that ultimate digital layer that protects you from any immediate physical retaliation. So this I might elaborate upon, or I might leave it as an open question on exactly how the nature of friendship stacks up as mediated through the hyper real aspects of the internet, because ultimately humans, as much as we like to live in our minds, we are ultimately ensouled, embodied souls. It's unnatural when we die and a we're just a a soul up in heaven. That's the whole point of the resurrection, that we're going to be restored back to um, the original state that we were supposed to be in as sinless, embodied souls. Um, and then, and so it's much easier, and ultimately this is going to make up a greater bulk of the essay in terms of calculated digressions. Um, it's it's ultimately easier to criticize the immorality that's immediately apparent uh, from hyper reality, because it's much easier to recognize something that we don't like than it is to recognize the slowly accruing quotidian, everyday goods. You know, um, and we see this like in the nature of media coverage, where they don't care about the time really that the metaphorical firefighter saves a cat out of the tree. I mean, it's like, oh, okay, whoop de doo. But if someone gets shot, then that's public, that's news. Um, and likewise, you see this in the case of morality. Um, that is true. It is easier to criticize in some respects. And the funny thing about that is it makes good criticism exceptionally hard, because it's so easy to do it mediocrely. Uh, you know, well, well-crafted criticism is truly an art form of itself. But anyway, I'm going into digressions now. Um, and so the kind of final crescendo, or sorry, not the crescendos, but the ultimate thesis point that I'm driving towards is that is that the only way out of the postmodern problem of hyperreality is that you need to, and I say this as a presuppositionalist, you need to essentially presuppose God. You need to presuppose a certain amount of revelation about the world, and in order to be able to actually function coherently in a consistent manner. That's a very important distinction. People people function cogently with the world just fine. The problem ultimately comes down to is like, well, how do you know that your whole senses are reliable? How do you know that you aren't deceiving yourself? Because there are plenty of examples of there are plenty of examples of puzzles and things like that. Like the Monty Hall problem would be the most famous example of it, where famous mathematicians like Paul Erdos, who's an interesting character of himself, uh, the guy literally denied God, called himself an anti-theist. At the same time, he maintained that God had a grand book filled with the most beautiful and elegant proofs. That he called the book just that, and he was resentful of God for hiding it. So very interesting character. But Paul Erdos did not believe the solution to the Monty Hall problem until he saw a computer simulator, like literally simulate out all the different sorry, all the different possible combinations in order to actually know or actually believe the reasoned proof of it, which is really remarkable when you think about it, because the whole point of mathematicians is that they're supposed to have the discipline to overcome their rational prejudices and intuitions and subject their guts to the unbending and unchanging eternal rules of mathematics. Yet Erdos, one of the greats, himself fell for it, and so ultimately, yeah, ultimately the that is what's going to be needed to undo what, in many respects, um, Lewis anticipated and predicted in his abolition of man, not just from the angle of, and this is important to the entire framing, not just on the angle of a pure set of morality, but rather, adherence to the Tao, but rather in how we use morality in order to structure and cohere our sense of perception of each other and of the what was I? I'm sorry. It's been a it's been a long day. My brain's kind of fuzzy from a bunch of people I had to talk to. But okay. Well, let me go back to my notes. Was it Oh yes. So in the same way that in the same way that that in the same way that Lewis looked at the natural law and how it affected us when we strayed from it. My my thesis would be that you can take that perspective and, using the fact that hyperreality is essentially a mechanical extension of the human imagination, you can illuminate aspects of the nature of things in a paradoxical manner. And the analogy I've come up with so far for this is that of 2D projection of 3D. And the paradox of that is, on the one hand, you're technically losing information when you jump down a dimension. On the other hand, it reveals certain interesting mathematical truths and properties that you wouldn't intuitively get or understand from the structure itself. Likewise, when you go up, you also begin to see interesting mathematical patterns emerge out of going up dimensions. And so yeah, that's kind of like my rough draft notes that I have for the Emancipation of Man. Computer is less than logos. What do you mean by that, David? Uh, computer is less than logos. I mean, there's an interesting little tangent one can go down on there. I personally am of the opinion that that there is something intrinsically beautiful to particularly how now Turing machines, with the rise of artificial neural networks, begin to mirror aspects of the human mind, and that there is in a very profound sense, that it is a act of worship to build these things that, when they are made to, instead of, like, chat GPT, which is made to ultimately lie about reality, to lie about reality, rather it's meant to truly reflect reality. That by making a copy of a copy of, or an image of, the image of God through the making of artificial neural networks and whatnot, we are, in a very profound sense, fulfilling, as I said earlier, as I said in my channel earlier, we are fulfilling the very prophecy about that Christ spoke about, that the very rocks of the earth would praise God even if man wouldn't. So yeah, that I don't think I'm trying too hard. I'm struggling with home fatigue right now, and just kind of not really used to talking in the void. Um, yeah. Mhm. Well, it technically doesn't mimic reality; it models reality. That's and was it I would get an energy drink, but it's a weekday and I have to go to sleep pretty soon after this. Um, it doesn't mimic reality per se in the same way that was it there's a there's a word I'm thinking of right now. It it doesn't mimic reality that in the same way that like mechanical biomimicry works. Rather, it tries to develop its own model of reality and see how that interfaces with reality itself. Like, like that's why you see, for example, if when they had, for example, with Alpha Zero, um, they made they made two variants with the Alpha Mind project uh, of Go playing computers. One was trained on human games, and ultimately that is trying to mimic human play. Alpha Zero was a program where it didn't even have the rule set. It just did inputs into it just did inputs into a game and was told whether or not it won or lost. And and so from nothing, it could master chess and it could master Go. It could even master video games. And this is where I think that many a person who criticizes AI for example not producing genuine art, I view this as the ultimate counterproof that both both Alpha Go and Alpha Zero, uh, in their chess games, where it's chess games produced from nothing, mind you, no mimicry really of or not needed of mimicry. AlphaGo technically was mimicking humans, but it didn't need to. AlphaZero proved that. It produced profoundly beautiful games, like at, games that you just don't see. Even humans, quite frankly, humans play at the very top level play relatively boring chess. Um, because it's very easy to just make less mistakes. And likewise, human designed computers that or computer programs that play chess, or likewise, they just grind. They just grind. Whereas if you watch Alpha Zero play against these human made computers that are hyper optimized and are like 400 plus elo points, which means that they'll always win ahead of humans. They could give up massive amounts of material and still beat the best humans in the world. Alpha Zero produces these profoundly beautiful, deep sacrifices that you just don't see really almost anywhere in human chess. Like even human chess tends towards tactical sacrifices, even in like the romantic era, especially in like the romantic era of chess, where everyone was sacrificing things. In the case of Alpha Zero, it actually produces these very deep, like 30 move down the road level positional sacrifices that are just they just stun the masters or the great masters of our day. And I don't see how explain, you can actually explain that by just claiming, oh, well, it's because it's restricted to an arbitrary rule set or something like that. Because ultimately, that's just a matter of parameters. Literally in the case of like picture generation, we have a very solid mathematical definition of what is the ultimate parameterization of picture generation. Now that happens to be computationally massive, but at the same time, there are ways to really cut down on that in the same way that, well, AlphaGo and AlphaZero were. Like they used massively smaller amounts of computational power, relatively speaking, to run compared to conventional chess computers. In terms of positions checking, was it like previous Go engines would like check billions and trillions of positions, um, whereas Alpha Go would only check about 50,000 positions or calculations. Like that's an insane amount of reduction, and in the end, it produces this profound, at least what humans that play the games perceive as this profoundly beautiful uh, work of art. So, that I'm trying to figure out how to integrate some of that into the overall flow of the essay. Are you high, David? Be honest. Be honest with us. Or are you just drunk? So, overall, chat, like, what do you think of the overall like rambling mess of the essay? I'm just kind of curious. I've spoken to it a couple times in like the essence of the essay between friends, but speaking it in public on the public hmm, speaking it to it on the pub in a public forum and putting it on the public record that you have this thesis, however however haphazardly thrown together, um, it's going to force me to finally put it all to paper, thoroughly edit it, and make it something refined that will actually that'll actually stand the test of time. Is a mess. Yeah, you're not exactly wrong. So anyway, I think I'll make it the live stream last for us. Go for a nice clean 45 minutes, just because I'm gonna be make it clean like that. Let's see. See if I can bring anyone else on. I didn't put anything in like Discords or anything like that. The Discord chats I'm in. Yeah. Is there any like? Hmm, yeah, no, you're not wrong. And it is back. That's that's odd. I don't know why exactly it died. So, oh, hmm. So anyway, chat. Where what was like the most interesting thread I presented, guys, that you'd like me to more elaborate on and develop more? I I have a feeling I could develop more on the develop into a more full essay unto itself. Yeah, the question of diving deeper, and it was already touched upon, or they already had like a stream on it with Geo and what's his name, they and Cringe Walker and such. But maybe there's something I could pull from Dreyfus. Dreyfus was a very great critic of AI and the early AI researchers. I don't know. And who decided to call me Doug? Why you calling me? Doug, why are you calling me? You want to join the actual live stream? I'll I'll send you the link. Oh boy, I'm gonna invite Doug Dimmadome onto the live stream. And if anyone else wants to hop on, you yes. No, you're nah, dude. You're not on the live stream. The audience is only hearing half of our conversation. You gotta click the link. The token. Okay, I'll check out. I'll check out what that stuff for Tolkien. I'm not a Tolkien scholar myself, but I'm an observer of human culture, and I see how people use narrative media. There's other stuff. There's other stuff that I've also thought about integrating as well. For example, how effectively we're seeing the archetypes of various media characters starting to profoundly affect, or not profoundly, but significantly affect the psychology and perception of self through the use of memes. Like for example, we literally, without any context, we immediately began deconstructing the Barbie movie, which in turn is affecting how Greta Gerwig herself is probably developing it as we speak. There's an interesting relationship there that to be explored. Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, enjoy the party. So, David, do you have a link to that you can drop in the drop and tag me in one of the Telegram chats for was it Ancient Faith Radio? Let's see. I'm gonna quickly Google that. Hmm. Thank you, David. Well, it is. Well, it appears I have passed the 45-minute mark I intended, but yeah, for a first time stream, I'd say it's always gonna be ugly. That's the first rule of any type of craft. Anyway, thank you all for showing up. It's the Amos Sewell podcast. You can find it easy. Okay, I'll rewatch for the comments for that. Anyway, thank you guys for showing up. Uh, James and James and David and Lane, and I don't see anyone else that commented. So for those that did not comment, thank you for showing up. Anyway, have a good day. All right, sorry, not a good day. Good night. Uh, I work at a job where I have to say good day to everyone.